the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Newton County School Board.
Thank you very much. Do I hear a motion to approve the certification of the closed session?
I move that we approve the certification of the closed session.
Do I hear a second?
I second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no one's opposed, motion carries. Welcome, everybody. We are looking at new business. The first item on the agenda is the 2021-22 capital budget plan. It's Dr. Nichols and Ms. Warner. Hello there.
So every year we have a little bit of a dilemma because we have a packet that we complete for the county for our request prior to actually sitting with them and discussing our request for the CIP. So this is just an opportunity for us to, as we're in the initial planning phases, bring to you things that we're thinking about putting in our CIP request, things that we're considering. We do not have all the prices yet. Mr. Paul is working through a couple of the HVAC requests still. These are items that we're looking to put in our year one of our plan. There are 5 years, and the major renovation on the elementary school would be in a prior, in a pushed out year, not 22. So we're just looking to bring this to you. Once we get the pricing on some of the items, we'll make sure that our request is a fair ask. And by that, I mean, we might look at the HVAC replacement. Dr. Nichols, we've talked about potentially asking for a larger amount of replacement at the middle school and the HVAC system, just because it's something that we need to push a little bit harder on. You will see in a later presentation on our CARES Act funding some opportunities to do some of that as well. So we're just trying to balance all of the different pots of money, what we might be able to do, what potentially could be COVID related and what's not COVID related. So these are just specifically things that we're bringing forward for CIP. If you have any questions or comments.
And because it's a work session, we just wanted to show you where we are at this point in time, and then anything you'd like to see or us to come back with before this comes before you for a vote. I will say so 2 of the items, the digital conversion, that's a standard piece we do every year for our one-to-one initiative, and the school buses, replacement of the bus fleet. That is 5 buses. So
those are a little higher than what you're typically used to. We are including air and also now radios for the county on with the purchase of the bus, the package. So that is included.
The car piece is TBD. You know, the county does give us their vehicles. The sheriff's department 3 or 4 years ago went to SUVs. Little did we know, and I did not know until late last week, that we can't transport kids in SUVs per Department of Education. So these SUVs that we'll be getting from the sheriff's department or that we get from the county may not help us the way the previous vehicles did in transporting kids. So we may need to actually purchase a car or 2 for those routes that don't require a bus. We can still use those SUVs for other means and different things that we would do, but that was a regulation that it's not new, but was new to me under a safety provision. So between now and next time we can talk about capital, I'm gonna push on that a little bit.
So is that a safety? Is it supposed to be less safe?
It's under the umbrella of safety. So, so that's why you see car. That's not something we typically have there, but we may need to consider that as we replace that fleet as well.
I'm curious about the rebranding and signs. What is that for?
So that is a project. So within each capital year, we like to do some projects that make us more energy efficient, that take care of some long-term needs, and then we do like to do some things. We want to do some things that really make an impact from a visual perspective as well. So, you know, whether that's painting, whether that's something in the stadium or so forth. When you look at a number of our signs, just taking New Canton Elementary and New Canton Middle School out in front of the road, there's an opportunity right there to rebrand those signs.
This is a work session, so people please feel free.
Absolutely.
I don't know what Sarah felt, but I was here when the signs were planned, And there was a lot of groups and a lot of discussion.
I got a little bit of the
See,
conversation.
look around. We've got some laughter about all the committee meetings we've had.
Now, the directional signs will probably still.
We're not offended.
Still saying, just with the opportunity for digital and the opportunity to have messaging and so forth, we're just investigating that as a TV.
There are some vintage signs out there.
They
So
are.
you're talking about, and I don't have the, whatever the digital.
Yep.
Okay, I got you.
That would be on 249, basically.
On 249.
Okay. Other questions? I
Yeah,
mean,
Mr. Miller was telling me about some of the groups and the pieces.
give them a little history tour, right? Yeah. Okay.
School nutrition facilities updates. That's HVAC.
Yes, we currently do not have air in that cafeteria. So this would allow, we did some electrical work last year, CIP related, that made way for us to be able to do this year. So really it's phase two. It allowed us to do the generator work, which we now have a generator installed that was part of this year's project. This would allow us to do the next piece, which would be to heat and cool. Heat, not necessarily an issue in that cafeteria because of all the baking and cooking, but the AC piece.
Any other questions or comments about the draft CIP plan?
Does this include, or one of the long-term, is to fix the drainage issues that we have had to make this transfer for long-term?
So I would say two things. One is there are some projects within the current year that we're looking to do that we did not put in this request because this is after July 1 funding. So we will be bringing other requests to you of CIP projects that we want to do in the current year, especially with the kids maybe not being in the building. STEM's really been rolling on a lot of the projects. And that particular project, once we know the scope of what that project is, I would think that that might be something that we could potentially push through here, but it's just a timing issue of, is it something that needs to be done right away, or is it something we can push out as a CIP request? So it's definitely on the radar and something that seems more big picture along this whole corridor all the way up to Newton Elementary School. So I think that is just something that we'll have to watch and work together with the county on as a project.
It may require a second retention pond. It may, it's going to, where all that flows and so forth. So it's a pretty big project that they're beginning that work, investigating. So.
Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Okay, thank you very much. I think you're up next to talk to us about the year-end transfer.
So each year we bring a year-end transfer. And this year we have completed the year with a $702,381.73. I will say, just for transparency, this memo, we have made one adjustment for $318.24 for a Title III reimbursement. So when you approve that this evening, I will ask that just you recognize that we will be adjusting that by $318. This is approximately 2.2% of our operating budget. This will increase our account balance and our CIP appropriations to $1.1 million. With that funding, we are requesting in the current year that you transfer these 4 items into our general operating fund. One is for furniture updates division-wide. This is something that we typically try to do with the new school coming on board. We may even try to utilize some of this funding for those types of purchases. There is a space over at Special Services that we're looking to potentially renovate, the old art room. So that could potentially fund some items within that space. Athletics support. We have spoken with John, and we are trying to support him in a way. We know that the gate receipts might not necessarily be there. They'll have 60% of their games. This would help in supporting the referees and officials to help him to support those. This would also support some of his uniform rotations. We are going to have a webinar tomorrow, which next item up is CARES Act, and we'll talk about it again in a minute. But I am looking to find out if we could potentially say that a loss of revenue in our athletic department is COVID related specifically, to the point that we could potentially transfer some of that funding over to his department. So if we're able to do that, it's just a balance. So I didn't necessarily recommend giving the full amount of what we thought he might need. This is just a start, and then we'll try to work through that. And if we need to make shifts later in the year, we'll come back and ask for additional funding.
How long will it be before we think we know whether that could be used for CARES Act?
We should know, we should have some sort of definitive answer tomorrow. We have a webinar for school divisions to go through the CARES Act funding and be able to ask those questions. That's our hope.
The next item is our redistricting. That had been previously approved. The funding just needs to transfer back over for the invoices that have come through. So that's a request back into our general operating from the same place you took it from prior. Bless you. And transportation is really just 2 rebates and refunds that were received for insurance claims that were submitted last year in our revenue line, and then the vehicles were fixed, and so we have to just move that back over to pay for those invoices. So with that being said, then we would have still a remaining $898, $544.20. Of course, you know that a portion of that will potentially be transferred for the new elementary school, and that will leave still a significant balance there for us to do additional projects. So that's our recommendation.
Okay. Comments, questions?
Over the course of these 3 reports and new business, all related to budget and planning, they all have different timelines and deadlines and so forth. So we're trying to make the smartest use of each funding with each project. So you'll see some overlap and some overlaying between them as we go through. So it's kind of nice that they're back to back to back. We can talk about those different buckets and what they need to show. Now that does, year-end transfer does come back before you later on as an action item.
So the furniture piece, is that basically to address damage, broken, aged furnishings?
Sure, it could be really anything that the schools have that needs to be replaced. It could be new areas within the school. I know you all remember we were talking about equity in the elementary schools and potentially doing learning spaces in the hallways and things of the current elementary schools. We also think we might be able to use CARES Act funding for those things as well. So we're trying to balance again, like Dr. Nichols said, when and what pot of money to use. And so we're just kind of shifting, and we have the ideas of what needs to be done, and then we're looking at what's available as far as funding to set us up for success and using it for things that really make an impact.
One of the provisions in the CARES Act funding is to have greater separation between kids. So putting an extended learning space in does solve that, but it also benefits the school for many years to come. So that's another thing you'll see in this funding, is we're really trying to do things that will help us presently, but also create a better future for us.
And thank you for doing it. I mean, for thinking like that. Any more questions about the transfer funds? Okay. If not, we are going to go to Warren. You're up again. CARES Act funding.
Okay, and Mr. Miller has another sheet he can share. So we thought it'd be a great time just to really detail all of the pots of money that we have and kind of where we are with them. And we also need you all to appropriate the funding that we specifically have received as a school division. So you will remember County CARES Act 1, initially we requested and received those items from the county. And then we had a second round of County CARES Act, which we received an additional $673, $773. We met with Mr. Helper today and talked through some of these. So the bad news is that, a lot of school divisions in Virginia are looking to buy the same things with some of these pots of money. So the availability is maybe not as great to have them received by December 30th. So that's why we're really working creatively to balance different pots of money that we have what we can get and when and how. So it's really a work in progress. You'll see a County CARES Act Round 3 request listed there. We are still working through that request with the county, again, based on availability of the current books and what we think we actually may be able to do.
We may actually have to pull that Chromebook request, just because of the feasibility of having the Chromebooks here by December 30th. Right now, the lead time on those can be upwards of March.
Yeah, so for new devices, we were looking at a March delivery date on the
And
order.
you don't pay until they ship.
Correct.
And how many?
That's another question we
devices
have this
is that?
tomorrow's webinar. And I'm sorry, flexibility within that because we are in a tight time frame. Every school division in the world is going after those same items. They not be Chromebook, maybe, but the supply and demand, most items you're trying to purchase right now have a great demand on them. So we're looking at flexibility on that. I'm sorry.
How many units are we intend to replace with the 300,000?
There was about 860 some odd individual units. Last I talked with them, it was grouped into the same order that Chesterfield had done with their large bulk. So we were hopeful that it was with that big of an order that we would have gotten them. But we're still looking at March with that. So.
And so the round 3 is just for more Chromebooks for students.
Yeah, because the original request was for 1,400 devices, and that was just that split up.
And because we sent our elementary Chromebooks home, because we started virtual, those were on the last year, possibly last year was the last year of their life. So it required a replacement, sort of out of cycle, out of place, but that the 1,400 was to address the elementary piece. We do believe if we can get the 800 or some semblance of that, we can manage this year and work through the process.
Chromebooks lifespan,
By default, they have about a 5-year life, 5-6 years for updates. Google's starting to push that out. It used to be that they had a hard cap where they wouldn't update the OS. They're starting to expand that now and push that out to 8 to 10 years. For the most part, a Chromebook is a Chromebook. I mean, the difference between the Dells and the Lenovo's that we have that 5-year gap, you would be really hard pressed to notice the difference as a general user. For somebody who throws a whole bunch of things and runs it hard and heavy, they'll see a little bit of a difference, but it's not like it's comparing like a new PC that came out this year versus one that came out 5 years ago. You definitely notice a difference.
And the durability of the hardware, or will they last that long?
It depends on how you have them. So the Dells that we had were in a cart at the elementary schools, so that's sort of what helped them get to that life. If they were always taken home every day, we wouldn't have.
Yeah, if a 5-year-old was taking them home every day, the lifespan would be dramatically.
Yeah, we
did
wouldn't
that
have.
come with cases? And so that would, I guess that's my other part, if somebody's, like in a virtual world, I mean, it might be something to think about long-term, and that's other stuff you're gonna be ordering, but for small children, well, actually, no. For any students, for any students, so they put them in their backpacks.
Yeah, in the cases that they come, don't really do a whole lot. I mean, they have a couple clamshells, they have a couple plastic cases, but the ones we typically tend to look at do have a higher rugged spec
Yeah.
to look at. So the case itself has some ruggedized features. So it's
Right.
got a rubber edging. It has, has a certain drop test that it has to get past.
It's fine.
But anytime you put something into a backpack and you have, I mean, I've seen them fold up pencils inside the cases. I mean, just anytime you throw it in a backpack with another 10 to 15 pounds worth of stuff.
And
then-
one Chromebook costs what? 300?
It depends. You could use that as a sort of a baseline. And it depends on, they do have different makes and models as far as what they have. But then you add on some of the extra accidental coverage on stuff. So in general, you're looking at around 400 general ballpark once you get all the services to it.
Can you swap out hard drives on them? No,
No, they're soldered on.
so when they die, they die. Okay.
Yeah, but Chromebooks don't hold up anything, so it's all in the cloud. So if you signed into a Chromebook and then I gave you another Chromebook,
Mhm.
the only thing you lost is anything you just had in your download file, but anything in your Google Drive, anything that you've been working on is.
But the other parts are replaceable, and you can,
There are parts that are replaceable on a Chromebook.
But not, yeah, I know, I got you.
Yeah, so I mean, we can do screens, we can do batteries, we can do boards, we can do cameras, all the bits and parts. It just depends on what size of volume you're talking about.
So you're pretty busy. You're pretty busy, huh?
We could be, we can be. It depends on what's coming and what's fluctuating.
So back to your point, Dr. Nichols, is, I guess what the opening question is on that round 3 is that it can you hold on to that money longer versus being forced to spend it right now.
so tomorrow we have the webinar where we'll get some of those answers. On Wednesday, I have my monthly meeting with Mr. Hathaway in the county. We're going to talk through some of those pieces too. So bringing those two pieces together to see if it is something we can do. And right now it's just a request that does have to go to the county committee and of course board of supervisors for approval. But our original request in round 2 was for whatever that total is, 566, 762, and we got 300,000 of it. So really it's that remaining piece.
One thing we talked about was, Matt mentioned Jonathan Stanger, the IT director at the county, requesting fiber replacement, and that's a project that we would definitely support, and what our needs are here at the school as well, and that's $160,000 request. So it's also putting in a word of, yeah, we like that too, when we're going and applying for these funding sources, that things that they may be putting in, and things that we can support as well.
So say that one more time. We're doing,
It's anybody can put in a request for this funding, and so
Talk about the fiber specific.
Mhm.
Now you want to, what,
Yeah,
John?
it's to, basically to upgrade the ring, to put in new service between,
what kind of service?
so right now we're about 10 to 11 years on the existing fiber. And it's all used up.
Wait, and this
We
is
don't have
for-
any
This is
expense.
for the courthouse area or?
This is for this campus, for
Okay.
counting admin building, sheriff's office, his items over there. And then once you get back this way, up to the other schools from here.
We're talking about internet fiber.
We're talking about, internet is one of the services that runs through it.
We also phones from.
But phone traffic,
Yeah.
is traffic to vehicle maintenance, to the radio tower. There's many services that run across this ring. But for us specifically, it would be connection back to the county. All of our internet services runs to the county, because that's where the Cox head end is. So we need that fiber transport to connect back. So it would give us more lines to use at that local level. Think of it as a connection between the buildings. We would have more connection points to push over to increase our bandwidth.
Well, there's no doubt that it's needed. We will miss seeing the superintendent stand out in the rain on his phone. But that being said, so the county pays for the fiber and then Cox bills us monthly? Is that the way that works? I mean, like you mentioned Cox, so I guess what I'm trying to understand is, there's a lot of conversation about broadband right now, and there isn't any doubt the schools need it, and admin needs it. It's crazy.
Right.
But I'm just trying to understand who pays for it.
So the internet is a separate piece than what we're talking about fiber.
Okay.
This is the local connection for New Kent County, basically,
Mhm.
is within this section.
Mhm.
And so Jonathan has services that run past our buildings
Mhm.
and run through. So it's basically building the road for the county to talk and to share those lanes.
Mhm.
We're just trying to widen the road.
Exactly. So we're trying to build more infrastructure for the roads to go
Right.
through. The head end equipment for Cox is located within the admin building.
Mhm.
And that's where our internet and our Watkins connections terminate to. that we then bring back. So it's separate when we pay the internet bill, but that fiber isn't for outside consumption.
Got it.
It's,
Okay.
it's the
Internal.
local, yeah.
And Matt, increasing the highway, the bandwidth, won't increase our bill.
No.
It
No.
just gives us a better service.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, it
So
all,
Cox is responsible for the infrastructure more or less to make it happen.
not for what we're talking about, not on this fiber section. Cox is just separate over there. So basically right now, if you think of it, we've got a high-speed train that runs from the county to here. What we'd like is many high-speed trains that run from here to the county. So right now, we've got our internet going through this central office connection, George Watkins connection. All of that is running over that single lane. What we'd like to do is have multi-lanes.
Mhm.
So we'll separate the traffic. I don't want to go over tech, but we basically just multiple trains will be going back and forth as
Got it.
opposed to the single lane.
Right.
And that's what it, and it'd be local use wise.
Okay.
Because internet's necessary.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Other questions about the list?
So the other item really for CARES 3 is just temperature scanners that we actually have in the buildings for just reimbursement. What we're really bringing to you for appropriation for this evening is everything below that. So our initial 214, 439 that we received, and we talked about that. Initially, we put in an application to use that for summer programming for next year, but that is something that we're able to amend. So we'll see kind of how we get to that point and then bring that back if we need to make any adjustments.
So you'll see the next 5 items, starting with 214 down to the 60,372, all have a very different deadline on
Yeah, I was gonna ask
them.
you.
Those are not due. Now, why that is, I do not know the answer to, but for these funds, we do not have to have them spent until September 30th of 2022. So some of this funding has to be spent by December of 20, others by September of 22. So we're really trying to position these funds. So the first, we didn't know we were going to get the second round of funds until we got them. The first round of funds, we really wanted to target summer because we know there's going to be learning loss. We know that there will be opportunities for teachers and so forth to push that money. And we had until 2022 to do that. And the remaining funds as well, except for that last one. We do not know why some have to be spent.
And do we have, so the summer program, do we have extra money built in for teachers for professional development?
That's really what we'd like the summer to be, and we'll definitely do some presentations on that moving forward, is there's an opportunity for students, and there's an opportunity for teachers, and it almost becomes sort of like a lab where you're learning the pieces in the afternoon and you do it with kids in the morning, whether it's a specialized reading program or it's a high school course or whatever, but you learn in the afternoon, or probably you'll learn in the afternoon, and then the kids will learn in the morning. So we're building sort of a lab school in the summer. It'll give us an opportunity to pilot a lot of new things that we'd like to do or adjust things we've done and try to do counter. So both and to pay teachers for coming and also to pay teachers to teach students. So 214 won't barely cover it, but it gives us a good start.
So the newest pot of money, right here, and it says 11:30 because originally that was the initial deadline that they gave us, and we're just now understanding that we have until 12:30 to spend these funds, but that's $579,933. This is something that these expenditures have to be COVID related. So we've been trying to, it's been a tough feeling because we do have shortages in our ADM, obviously, for our general operating budget, which we're hopeful that the General Assembly will take care of us in the upcoming budget year, but it's hard kind of having that on the side and really not being able to do much about it with this particular funding. So we're just trying to get creative. And I'll just say some of the things that we're looking at right now, and we're trying to move forward with anything that we can currently, or identify expenses that we already have used out of our general operating budget to kind of fill those holes, if that makes sense. We have a storefront going up at transportation. We're looking potentially for additional HVAC units at the middle school, water bottle replacements on the water fountains, the dishwasher for school nutrition that Leslie had purchased. We have a nursing supplement that we have provided in the current year, potentially permanent subs in buildings, unemployment claims that we received over the summer. Additional items for athletics, we have a list from John and also a list from Leslie of things that she has spent also in the current year for COVID-related items. We are looking at a high school canopy over the senior courtyard for outdoor learning space out there, along with outdoor learning spaces at the other 3 schools. We're looking at plexiglass solutions in all of our schools. And some of the money in the facilities upgrade also might be used for those items as well. Our signage that we have purchased will push towards this funding. And then obviously if any of the revenue in the athletics, things like that, we're also able to use salaries and benefits of anybody that has a significant change in their role in the school division. So we have identified a few individuals that we may be able to shift salary dollars over. I'll just say that this is a very long list, but we're trying to pull anything that makes sense to pull and also try to do some creative things. You know, we're looking at the art room space to renovate, but Tim has to get it all done in time, so.
Yeah, these projects have to be completed in this time frame. It can't just be ordered, it actually has to be. We looked at some HVAC projects and we may still move forward with those. We just have to make sure we get the equipment in, we get it installed, and get all of that done. Our first priority really has been looking back to March because we can. So going back to March, what are those expenses that we did incur, charging those first? Because that frees up money in other areas which have greater flexibility and a longer time frame. And then we're looking at how can we create the future with these funds and the constraints. We cannot use them for current shortfalls that we have. We really need to use them for current shortfalls that we have. So really trying to work through that to make that happen. We'll come back at another meeting as well with this more fleshed out so you guys can see it. If you have ideas either now or moving forward, please push those our way. I think Dr. Harding and I have had a couple conversations about creativity and trying to think about what we can do because we want this to be an investment and we don't want to just buy things for right now. We like to buy something for right now and moving forward.
So question, when we were in the very beginning of this, March, April, and we had COVID-related expenses back then that we did not have funding for at the time, and we were using our operating budget to cover those, are we able to retroactively reimburse ourselves?
We can, but I'll say we did a really good job of not having a lot of expenses actually, almost to our detriment. But we did have a lot of support from the County CARES Act funding with all of our PPE and things of that nature. So that really was an expense of ours. We tried to save on, overtime hours, different types of pay that we just found creative ways to try to save and not have those expenses.
We really limited our costs, not knowing the additional funding was going to just, almost to our detriment. But it does, as long as we're willing to think creatively and work through this, give us an opportunity here. Others working alongside other superintendents because we're all working in the same category. Some people are having to spend $9 million by, just depends on how large your school division is, just working through those different things. And so some are using PPE and sanitizer, and we had that covered through a different avenue. So just going back and looking at those and as the position one that Haney just mentioned, we just worked through that as an option last week. That folks whose jobs have been redefined during this virtual.
That's what I was going to ask next, if there was maybe a stipend for the additional time that our teachers are spending learning how to do virtual learning.
And that's another thing that we asked and superintendents have asked about is it cannot be used for a bonus.
Not a bonus, a stipend.
Well, so language is very important. So some of the questions we have for tomorrow are around, language and what is and what isn't. And then we want to be able to quantify it and make sure it's a responsible use of funds. But that was one of the first things that people asked. This is really difficult on employees. Our team, every school, has really stepped up and done a phenomenal job. We do something. And using that language that we utilize is no, it cannot be used for that. So, but going back to the drawing board, we've been told a lot in the past week. And we just keep coming back and redesigning it every year, yeah.
I definitely want to support them though. I know Kelly's looked at standing desks for some of our employees and things like that that support them in the classroom. Things that they're asking for. Anything that we could creatively tie back to COVID and make it work and support our folks is definitely something that's worth looking into to see if we can do.
Thank you for being creative and frugal at the same time. I mean, questions? And I know this is ongoing and to be continued.
But, and hearing what you're saying about this in November, I mean, based on our next meetings, the challenge is you're gonna have to spend a lot of that money before we even meet.
No, we only do November.
Yeah,
I mean,
tonight,
that's what I'm saying. We only have one more meeting before all that money has to be spent.
And it's gonna be in March.
yeah, so tonight's a request to appropriate that money. It doesn't then go to the county for appropriation. October 28th, I think is their next meeting, but we'll definitely keep you updated through other means. And two-way, you guys see things as well. Make sure you send them our way.
But we've already received this $579,000.
We've been awarded it. We don't physically have it yet, but this is, there's certification that we have to sign, basically saying we'll use these funds as we've been told to. And then there's a certification that we'll sign in December that says that we've spent them all. So we'll be punching just, deposit basically in the state.
It won't be a reimbursement like we do through a lot of our federal grants. It'll be a deposit that we receive and spend out.
So it'll be money in, money out, basically.
Potentially with some of the things that we, for example, signage, we purchased that. We knew we had to have it. It was an expense. Knowing that these types of funding would come through, that's something that we have now that will move that expense over into this source, and then that will free up what our general operation has been covered in the past. And there will be a lot of that flexibility and just determining what fits in each of those buckets and all of the different funding sources and what we can shift to really just set us up for the best outcome in the current year.
And anything we can free up now just gives us opportunity, spring, any of the shortfalls that we do have, summer, and moving forward.
One other thing that's happened, they gave us the ability to use our textbook funding for different, whatever really we need.
Without a local
We
match.
don't have to have our local match in the current year, so that's a whole nother funding source that we're trying to creatively think through. We met with Matt this morning on our Chromebook replacement cycle, and that's something that'll come up next year. And so really just trying to think forward of how can these things set us up kind of for success down the road.
That was general assembly action in the special session, those for the governor, but that's another funding that is not, doesn't expire December 30th. If you could look at that later on in the year as well. We have it for this school year. We did receive word that will be the child nutrition waiver grant go will be for the entire school year. So that frees up some worry and some backfill that we were going to look to do as well as Leslie and our team. So all of these different parts of just making sure we're doing, looking at the total picture with each one of them and give us opportunities in the future.
Any other questions? And we will move to old business, and the first item in old business is the new elementary school.
Oh, this is new elementary school. And this is a quick update for you. As you know, we are moving forward with the new elementary school, and I'm incredibly excited about this work. The county has gone into the BPSA bond pool. So just timeline-wise, October 20th, the bond rate is set. So we'll know what the bond rate is. We'll know exactly what the county is in the bond pool for, although we've already worked through those pieces. November 12th, the county holds a public hearing on the funding for the new elementary school because it does exceed 1% of their total budget. So they do have to do a public hearing. That's by policy law. So that's November 12th. So on November 16th, we would like to come before you with moving forward with the contract for the new school. So in between now and November 16th, we have a contractor working on the value engineering piece. We're working with Mosley, and we're also working with the Parent Spinner. Our work right now, and we're working with our attorneys, is to drive down to negotiate the total cost of that building, so that when we come to you on November 16th, you have all that in place, and we're able to move forward with the contract. So that's the current timeline for the next month. October 20th, bond rate. November 12th is the public hearing. November 16th, we come before you with moving forward with a contract. So for us, the money has to be appropriated before we can move forward with the contract. The hearing on the 12th allows that to happen. So just waiting for those pieces. In the meantime, we have two other pieces of business with this new school. I think first is the naming of the new school. I'd like to do updates with you and not call it new elementary school update. I'd like to really officially name it the New Kent number, whatever the name's going to be. You know, when we first started this project, we had a naming form. It is still live. We do still receive submissions. I'd like to republicize that and regenerate interest around it. We sort of let it fall down a little bit because the project got delayed. And then we'd like to come back to you guys in this new year or in this year to come before the board with a recommendation for naming, and the board, of course, votes on that per policy. So that's the naming piece. The other piece is redistricting. We've actually done a great deal of the legwork on the redistricting. The Swiffer's on that committee. We have two options for redistricting to present to the community. We've been ready with that since July. But the initial plan was to do a public hearing on it in August. But of course, you know what we were doing in August. It was about return to learn, and the school had been delayed at that point, and it just didn't seem right. So we need to imagine a redistricting timeline. So we're at the point that we have options, and we can go to the public with them. When is the best time to do that with the public? Knowing that we have a fall 22 open. So that's just something to consider, and you can talk about right now as far as naming. How do you feel with that timeline to have the naming wrapped up in 2020, and then redistricting, looking what timeline we would like to do for that as well. I don't want redistricting to get lost in return to learn. I want people to really be tuned into that because it does impact our elementary families. So it's one of those things, we're ready on both fronts. It's really about timing and community engagement.
So those two items we're gonna bring forward in new year. Is that what you're thinking, or before that?
I think the naming we could do in the current year, in 2020,
Okay.
by the December piece, the relaunch.
Okay.
If we have a contract on the 16th, I think we can go forward with the naming piece if the board feels that's a good timeline. We have a number of suggestions. We have the top three. We can bring those forward for discussion and so forth. Yes.
Here's a question. So has there been any consideration of renaming New Kent Elementary School? And the reason that I ask that is because when you say New Kent Elementary School, it means there's one. Like you have New Kent Middle School, New Kent High School, there's one. And my thought was, what if we took the top two names and we considered that? And I know that there's some branding and there's probably some things I'm not even thinking of, but would that be, like when you hear that, me say that, what goes through your head right then?
My pick is all the t-shirts.
Oh, what a question for a Monday night.
We're just warming you up for the next presentation.
That's okay. I just, I think it would be, if we're going to name the new school, and we have George Watkins, I don't think the new school is going to be New Kent Elementary too, so it would make sense to look at a name for us as well.
Just food for thought.
And maybe that we could do it at any time, or maybe that could be something we could consider with grand opening of New Kent Elementary School once it's reimagined and the feasibility study later this year. Maybe that could be part of that process as well.
My only hesitation on using the top two is that New Kent Elementary, I want them to know they're involved with the name New Kent Elementary.
Okay.
A lot of the suggestions that came forward with the new elementary school are unique to that portion of the county.
Demographics of that area.
Because Palm Bridge Elementary is one of the Quentin. There are a lot of things that are unique to that section of the county, but I'm open. I just want to do it before we do the rebranding signage project.
Oh, yeah.
Please.
But you're gonna push out there to tell people that that's still open.
This week
and-
on social media, we'll push out the fact that we're moving forward to do elementary school. Make sure you get your name suggestions in, we'll be moving forward with the board, kind of reintroduce it, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a, I think it's really important with the momentum, with all of the, for lack of a better word, the negativity from the pandemic, is that if we can decide on the name, put the sign up on the property, basically that says, this is where the new elementary school with the name, then I think it's a great rallying point for the community that we're moving forward in something in a real positive way with the new name, a new elementary school, as we're making progress. And I think it would be a great boost for the community as well to see that everything hasn't shut down, basically, and that we're making progress. So I think that would be a real huge advantage if we can come to a conclusion with a name and have it done, because my assumption is if we agree on a contract in November, then construction would potentially start the first of the year, I would assume. If not before, I guess it just depends.
Depends on lining up subs.
Yeah, mobilization of that.
Okay.
So I'll work on both the naming timeline and redistricting timeline for you guys to react to, and then we'll move forward. In the meantime, we'll go ahead and push it out through social media, and in accordance with the board policy, what can be named and what can't be named.
All right.
We're excited.
So the next one is return to learn, sir.
All right. So the presentation you'll see tonight is shorter than the one you saw last time, but some of it is repetitive. Really, the purpose of tonight was to bring forward the survey results, class size, and answer some of the other questions that you may have had in the meantime. So just moving forward, we're looking at a phased approach. This is the criteria we're using to consider when returning to school. We did meet with the Chickahominy Health Department today. We will be meeting with them bi-weekly moving forward and looking at these specific metrics. So the regional county health metrics, our current staffing, that's more internal than Chickahominy Health District. The students choosing in-class learning. A lot of this depends on class size. We still have spacing requirements that we need to have. So the model can change based on students and who chooses which type of learning. And then the health of students and staff in our school, just looking at, as we phase it in, are we having positive cases? If so, how are we managing it? Are we keeping people safe? Those different components too. So we went through this criteria with the health department today, and we'll continue doing that in our bi-weekly meetings. And feel free to jump in at any point with the questions. So a lot of these, you've seen these slides several times now. Really our process for returning to school, review the metrics, plan for the return, and then that cohort returns, and we move through the cycles through that piece. Each one of them has different components that we need to do, and communication with families throughout. Just a reminder of cohorts and some adjustments that you'll see. This is all proposed and pending board approval outside of cohort 1. They're already here. So cohort 1 is K-12 students with IEPs on an adaptive curriculum and pre-K students with IEPs. So that has been in place since the second week of school. And then our internet cafes have been in place. They're not a cohort, it's just the service we provide since the first week of school. The next cohort is cohort 2, grades K and 1. So you'll see some adjustments based on conversation with principals, conversation with teachers. The week of November 2nd through 6th is a broken week in the fact that we have a day off for election day. Schools are closed during conferences that day. In talking with the principals, I was reminded that these 5-year-olds have never been to our school before. All of the different things we've done, we typically do with kindergarten, from screenings to come meet your teachers to open house. None of those have been done. So what the teams would like to do is use that week, that's a fragmented end of the quarter, to do some kindergarten orientation while they continue with virtual learning. So teachers may set up appointments with families, but kids would actually get to see the building, see where their classroom would be. Having been an elementary school principal, kindergartners on the first day, even when you do all those things, are a lot of fun because they don't remember, their teacher or where they go and so forth. So we want to kind of make that smooth and do that piece the week of the 2nd through the 6th. In this plan, you could shift teachers. We are working very hard to minimize that shift, but it also gives us an opportunity to meet your new teacher or do transition if you need to do that. So week of November 9th, kindergartners will be in school by themselves. They have to run their place, they're in charge. Week 2 would be November 16th, and we have capital I, and then first grade returns to school. Is that what you guys are saying too on the side? Amazing how many times you look at this, don't catch it till you're live. So really we phase them in a week at a time. Then we would look at how those groups are doing and move towards cohort 3, cohort 4, and moving forward. And it's important to note that the model that we can deliver, we talked about a lot of different models. We talked about virtual, we talked about hybrid, and with kindergarten 1, we're looking at 4 days a week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. But a lot of that is predicated by the results. We knew going into the survey results that we would have the space to do 4 days a week. That's a good and a bad thing. That means our K1 numbers are back down, and they are. If we go back to our ADM conversation that we had a little bit earlier, our numbers are down. When we get to 5th grade, for instance, we may not be able to do 4 days a week. The survey will kind of dictate because we need to make sure we keep people safe, and we need to make sure we do this well. But we will work through that process. So we did survey just K1 families, and we did get responses from all families. Now, did all families fill out the survey immediately or in the window? Most did. So we were very excited about that, but the staff at New Kent Elementary and George Watkins called the families that were not listed. So they took their rosters, took the results. We said we would default you to virtual if you did not reply, but we wanted to make the extra effort and contact each family to make sure we had the right placement. So you can see the numbers. GW is up top. Kindergarten, we had 85 in person. So just overall survey results, about 73% of K1 families wanted to return in person. 27% wanted to stay virtual. We do think as we go up in grade level, we'll see more families choose virtual. To us, this was just showing that virtual is difficult for our 5 and 6-year-olds. Now, I will say our teachers have done a tremendous job of doing virtual instruction with their youngest learners. They really have stepped up. 85 in person in kindergarten, 13 virtual. First grade is 69 in person, 25 virtual. So you see that number goes up. New Kent Elementary, 75 total kindergartners, 45 in person, 30 virtual. So it does vary by school. And then first grade, 54 in person, 40 virtual. So that's total number of kids that we have in K1 right now and what they chose. Okay. All right. So one of the questions we talked about last week was what would class size be? So we wanted to show you what the largest class size would be. Am I saying that right, Ross? Okay.
Average. Which is going to be the.
It's going to be, yeah, this would be the largest class size you would see.
This would be the largest.
Correct.
not the average.
They're all going to be about the same because they've distributed like that. So in person at New Kent, George Watkins, you can see 17 in each class, or 17 is the in-person number. The virtual would be at 13. So at New Kent Elementary, 15 in kindergarten, both virtual and in person, and then first grade, 18 and 20. So that's how those numbers broke out in the survey by grade level, by school. I believe that means we'll have 1 virtual teacher in kindergarten at George Watkins, 1 virtual at New Kent Elementary, and then you'll have 2 of each in first grade. No?
And it's one,
I was on a roll.
one per grade level at Watkins,
Okay,
2 per grade level at Newton Elementary School.
For virtual.
For virtual, sorry, for virtual.
okay, there we go.
And, hold on, let me check that first grade. First grade at Watkins would have 2.
Correct.
Yes,
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes. Yes, so 2 of each at New Kent Elementary, that's how you get to 15 and 20. And then you have 2 in first grade at George Watkins, you have 25 kids, so you have a 13 and a 12. And then 1 at kindergarten.
Well, just a clarification.
Yeah.
Families can change their mind from in-person to virtual.
Correct.
Okay.
But if you choose virtual, we are holding you to virtual until the end of the semester, unless you have extenuating circumstances, and we certainly work with every family. But it's easier for us to move you into the virtual world than it is to move you in person.
But based on your surveys though, has that already been decided?
Yes,
So the numbers you gave us are the actual numbers
yes,
of what's going into the school,
Correct.
correct?
as we stand today, yes.
Okay.
Can you back up back up to that last slide one more time? Alex? So 85 students divided by 17 teachers, you've got what? 4?
Yeah.
In the classroom?
We have 6 total teachers at kindergarten at Watkins. So 1 would be virtual, 5 would be in person. We have 6 in first grade as well, 2 virtual, 4 in person. At New Kent Elementary School, we have 5 at a grade level. So 3 in person kindergarten, 3 virtual, or 2 virtual, and first grade would be 3 and 2 virtual.
We really need to find a way to stress the importance to parents of how dependent we are on them and their good stewardship of making sure that their kids aren't coming to school with symptoms.
Parents really are the linchpin of this. If your child is not well or exhibiting symptoms or meets any of that criteria, please just keep them home, take them to the doctor.
Or if they're exposed.
Correct.
If they've been exposed to your friend or neighbor that's been sick and got COVID, and just keep them home, get them tested, just to be on the safe side.
That's the best way that families can help us with this one.
So the implications that the sick child comes to school remind us what happens. We do, if other students or the teachers in contact, what is the implication when a parent sends a sick child to school?
So a parent sends a sick child to school, and we cannot attribute that to anything else. So there are cases where we would have a student or a staff member sick, but we'd attribute it to something else using a doctor's reference point. So let's say that it is COVID related and sent to school. Then we would contact trace back, and then any person, little person, big person who had significant interaction, as defined by 15 minutes within 6 feet, would be subject to quarantine. That could very likely be an entire class. It could very likely be a subsection of a bus. But yes, so with that's COVID related, yes. And unless we can attribute to something else, we do treat it as COVID. So we've had situations with sinus, we've had situations with allergies. That's why I say, as long as we can't attribute to something else with the doctor, that's how we treat it.
Currently, under those numbers, we don't foresee any transportation issues. Like running double routes or things of that nature because of certain routes have more students, so we have to drop off, come back and pick up again.
Right now, this is another reason I'm advocating a phased approach, and I have had talked to some families that said, why can't we just do K-5 right now? Or can't we just do, we're going to learn a lot of lessons in this K-1, specifically on transportation, with staffing, with substitutes, we have a smart plan in place, and we know we can do the K-1 piece. It's when we start to add 2, 3, 4, 5, or we get middle school in, we may have to adjust schedules, we have to adjust routes and things like that. The K-1 piece, we feel very confident in. We'll have to continue to adjust that as we move forward. So no, I don't foresee double routes with the K-1, but it is a likelihood once we bring more phases in cohort stuff. We are relegated to one student per seat on the bus. And we actually have to work the State Department to be able to vet school visits too. So unless you are in the same household, or yeah, unless you are in the same household, we can put more than one on a bus. So that drastically reduces the number of seats. We did ask that in our transportation survey. I believe almost 40% said they would not require transportation to or from.
Oh, on this last survey?
Correct.
Well, that's good.
So
That's at least-
I think it was 39.8 somewhere in there, and then subsets needed morning or afternoon. So
So of the people that were going to be in person, only 39 or 40% of those people were gonna need transportation,
the flip, so 60% would need transportation, 40%
would
don't
not
need.
need.
Just as a rough number. Yeah, of the group that were coming in person, about 60% would need transportation. So we would run routes based on that. We have their names and we're working on those pieces.
Can I see those numbers on that slide one more time, Ross? There won't be that many. I wouldn't think there would be that many students on the buses.
So right now, K1, it's really manageable. Once you go 2, 3, 4, 5, and we have 700 kids, and then 40% of those, and that'll start to put a strain on it. And we'll have to look at, can we offer 4 days a week, 2, 3? I'm excited, and the board pushed back on the hybrid piece, so I'm excited that we have a proposal that has 4 days. Can we sustain that? Those are things we would learn in the weeks to come.
So the instructional hours will be 9 to 1:30, correct? Which will be the same for in-person and virtual.
Currently, yes.
And the reason being for in-person, I've had some questions from parents as to why it's not a regular school day.
As we will phase in additional groups, we will take a look at that schedule. But in this first phase in, we want to keep things as consistent as possible. So that moving forward, we would be able to make those adjustments. To go from 9 to 1:30, take an 8 to 3 or whatever we would do, at the same time, we're doing something for the first time. We wanted to get families and our staff and everybody involved, because we'll have teachers on both sides of it now that have a similar schedule. And then if we do have to quarantine and move back to a virtual environment for our classroom, we still have that set schedule. And if we do need to move between classrooms for whatever reason, we sort of have that set schedule as well. So that'll evolve, but that's the recommendation right now.
You look at your transporting for internet.
So internet access, the online access centers will still be open, and those are the hours that we run for those as well. So we will continue to transport those students as well. Those students would likely ride the same bus as our K1 to maximize efficiency, but still follow the guidelines and the rules. So we won't be running online access center buses and then kindergarten, those pieces.
Can we post, because I know we've got questions from people, some we've gotten in enough time to be able to answer. We did get some questions today that I think you understand. I mean, there's no way if we get something at 3 o'clock on the day of meetings, we can't answer those questions, right?
It takes some time for us to research that and ask questions.
I was just gonna ask that we could update our Q&A and be really clear where we put it. So it's about, K1, return to school, cohort 2, returning to school, and then answer. I mean, you did a great job of answering questions. I'm sure we've got more
Sure.
that we could put in there so that parents could see some of those
Specific
answers.
cohort 2, kind of pull it out, Q&A cohort 2.
Mhm.
Okay, we can do that.
And then I would just say to board members, if you happen to have gotten questions from other people, send them to, do you want us to send them to you?
Yes, please.
Okay. So if you get questions from people, send them to Brian. And then I'm sure a lot of them are the same, so you can consolidate them.
Absolutely.
The other thing I guess is, and this is hard, but parents I just want to say to parents, this is not going to look like regular school. I mean, it's just not. I know you want your kids to come to school. We want them to come to school. But if we have a challenging fall and winter, everyone is going to have a plan B. I know I say it at every board meeting and every work session. I cannot say it enough. You have to be able to fall back should the class be quarantined. Should something come up, don't be left, in a situation where you don't know what to do. So it will not look like a regular K-1, and it will class experience, and we have to have a plan B.
Dr. Hartman, those are both great points. So it is at least 3 feet distance with masks. So masks are required. We will minimize movement within the building. Our goal is to keep kids in cohorts, much easier to do in elementary than it is in secondary as well, because of shifts in classes. So kids will, by and large, they will have recess and we'll work through those protocols, but they will by and large be in the same room all day, limited in their movement. So to your point, it will not look like the school that we're used to, but it will be in person.
We'll also be using the seating charts in the classroom and on the school bus, all the buses, so that way we're able to identify anyone they were sitting around.
Yeah, not only seating charts, but also daily seating charts. So like Cynthia's, and just because we are running through, with the programs that we're running right now, we're running through contact tracing and things like that. If Cynthia is assigned to seat 2, then I may have to quarantine Cynthia, but Cynthia wasn't there that day. So it's daily seating charts. So Cynthia always sits in the seat, but she's not here. So, all of those different pieces from anywhere you're going to be, the bus, the classroom, anything, knowing where you are, be able to straight the cornerstone of the work we'll have to do.
Do we know from some of the other schools, there aren't a lot that are ahead of us. Everybody pretty much has had a cohort 1, right? But that whole idea of a cohort 2, having kindergarten or first grade come back, is something that's really common among schools right now.
Yes.
A couple of them are a little bit ahead of us, right? So any lessons learned from them?
I think some of the lessons learned are reflected in the plan along with the seating piece. We did a meeting with the health department today. That was a big part of what we did, is lessons learned from a neighboring school division that's in our same health district. Having a single point of contact, which we have a lead nurse who's been phenomenal with this work, how to minimize movement within an elementary building, within a secondary building, some of the busing pieces. So yes, lots of lessons learned.
We are running visits to schools as well, who are fully open.
Yes, we do have some.
And one of the things that I think has probably been the most dominant question from parents has been whether their children will have the same teacher. We know that is impossible to do 100%. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. And I'll also include Mr. Moncrief. So I'll start, Mr. Moncrief, if you want to jump in. Please do, because Mr. Moncrief and Mr. Mack have been, and their teams have been integral in this work. We could not do this without the teachers. We could not do this without the administration. So every effort is being made to minimize that. But in cases where it's impossible, say that you have Mr. Nichols as your first grade teacher, but you want to go virtual, and he's an in-person teacher, that's going to be an instance where that happens. Or Mr. Nichols is the virtual teacher, you want to go in person, then so those are the primary changes that are being done. But Mr. Moncrief, I don't know if you want to add to that.
The board last couple of times has said how important that is, and I agree with that. So what we did, at least for our first criteria, was try and keep everybody in place. So, we picked teachers. So if a teacher had, they were the in-person teacher, every kid in their class that was in person stayed with that. And that was the starting point. If you were a virtual teacher, every kid in your class that was virtual stayed with you. And we tried to sort after that, based a little bit on academics and other things. But in our building, it worked out pretty well. We were able to keep at least about half the class with the teacher in most cases. So, there were switches, but I felt pretty good about it once we were done.
there some transition steps or opportunities or plans for the kids that are going to have to switch?
Well, the kids that are going to have to switch, we're in person, we're doing the orientation for kindergarten that week. We're going to set appointments for parents coming with children. And then also we're going to do virtual videos for the kids that are going virtual. And in person in first grade, we don't have the orientation piece, but we are going to try and make them as welcome as we can. We're right now getting with Dave Havlin at the high school to do some videos and things to show them what's going on.
In talking to both teams and both schools over the past month, one of the ideas, and I believe the George Watkins first grade wanted to utilize that Friday check-in that we currently have as a teacher, virtual piece, and have you check in with your new class ahead of starting. So the teachers are brainstorming those transition ideas. As tough as it is on the kids to check classes, it's really difficult for the teachers too. So they're struggling with it and want to do sort of a, we got this, we're in this together, shifting to the next classroom. So that's what, I threw out a couple ideas and they gave me like 10. That was much better than any damn. But
The dates on this, does it correspond with the quarter, the end of the quarter? I don't have that.
the quarter technically ends, and the quarter is less important than the elementary. I need to say that, but I mean the secondary. But so the quarter ends on that Monday before election day. That's the fourth. So second quarter technically opens on the 5th, which is when we were going to start. But wanted to make sure we did one, we needed board approval, and then two, to do some orientation pieces for kids and then start clean on that night.
So speaking of schedule, what is the time gap going to be between getting first grade in and then starting to implement the second and third grades?
And that's a great question. So it really will depend on that criteria that we have in place. So best case scenario, let's say health trends are in the right direction, K1 has gone seamlessly. It takes us about 2 weeks to build routes. So I would say somewhere in that 3 to 4 weeks time span. We would need to do, and that's something our team is going to talk about tomorrow, is surveys for 2 through 5, because we need to know what 2 through 5 families think. In order to be able to put a schedule together. So while kindergarten and first grade are in, we'd like to do a 2nd through 5th grade, or 2, 3, or 2 through 5, depending on how it's going, and get that next set of data so we can begin building those routes in the background and sort of bringing that together. So I would say best case scenario, 3 to 4 weeks. But
I'm sorry.
we could also look at, depending on how things are going, some of these cohorts could collapse together. So we could say, okay, now staffing is a big part of this. And that was one of the questions that I've received is, staffing kind of pushed us in this direction. But we have to continue working through the staffing piece to make sure we have staff. So that's just a ballpark of that thing.
I think one of the things that I'm the most concerned about is the inconsistency. I was talking to a constituent today actually, and just talking about how hard it would be for kids to come to be in a virtual environment, to go to school, to get shut down, move to a plan B. Would they then go to the virtual? Just those pieces, I feel like are they're going to be really hard on the families and kids, because as much as we want to prepare and we think we can have a plan B ready to go, I just think that that's going to be pretty difficult.
Absolutely. And that's on our next step slide, and it involves under school division is that process, and try to make that process as seamless as possible for staffing. But it does depend on a number of variables. While we're doing the quarantine, who is sick, if somebody is sick, and those pieces there. So it is complex.
But in an ideal world, you would anticipate, if all goes well, that we would be able to bring all the elementary students back before Christmas break.
And I mean, I guess that's what I was gonna say.
Okay.
If you're 3 weeks out from after the second cohort,
Yeah.
you have the Thanksgiving vacation, and then you have the Christmas vacation. And so you really, I mean, that's a very fragmented time. You've got to look at your calendar to think about.
the end of the semester.
The fragmented calendar actually sort of helps us in this.
Does it?
Yeah.
Because you're able to do K1,
Mhm.
and then there's a break, and then you're able to bring in, so second semester is, second 9 weeks has always been a weird one, because it's really 3 starts and stops. I
Yeah,
start, I stop at Thanksgiving.
right.
I start, I end it, I stop at winter. I start and I end it in the semester. And they're almost evenly distributed,
Mhm. Okay.
more or less, 3-week segments.
Right.
So it actually gives us an opportunity. I don't know that we can do 4 or 5 before the winter holiday. That may be that last 3-week segment. But really it just depends on how things go.
And so much will be our health metrics and our staffing and what goes on in between, just making sure that everybody's social distancing and not coming with symptoms, things like that. It will
Well, that's
reduce our exposure risk.
That's the thing. You can't, I mean, how can you do that? I mean, our numbers right now, our cases in New Kent are higher than they've been. And we don't have less cases than what we had when we made this decision to go virtual. like, a month
So-
ago, 3 months
So
ago.
when we say, okay, because we're gonna vote again. And we're gonna bring this up every time there's a cohort. And we're gonna look at the data to guide us, right, to give us information. So I'll put you and any administration on a hotspot here.
Sure.
When you look at the reason that we haven't been open up to date,
Mhm.
and then you look at where we are right now, what's changed for us to be open?
I think what's changed for us is a better understanding and learning from schools that have been open. What's changed for us is the ability to open up online access centers we want, bring kids in, do screenings, get equipment set up. So we have our signs, we have our stations, we have all those pieces. The nurses in their training and what they've been through to this point. I've interacted with the health department more times in the past 8 weeks than I have the previous 18 years. So I mean, those pieces in there, and then bringing in our students with disabilities on the adaptive curriculum, and seeing pre-K kids on the playground and working through those pieces.
Right.
And a number of conversations with staff directly working with us.
Do you think that the fact that the Department of Ed has encouraged us to open, played a part across the state?
Across the state, yes. And I will say we are taking our own approach, and I appreciate the board for supporting that. That we are going slower than some of our counterparts. We'd like to do it well. We'd like to do it right. I think also, we came initially with a hybrid approach for K1, and the board kind of pushed back on that because of what we were doing virtually. So we went back to the table again, so can we do a 4-day-a-week in-person piece? So I definitely think that that's a factor, but the board made an initial vote for the first semester, which gave us the flexibility to do some of this and not try to bring back 3,300 kids, February 5th or whatever the case may be. So that flexibility, we're really utilizing that.
Okay.
And so the state has phase 2 as K2 kids can come back. We're only doing K1. Because we wanted to chunk elementary into 3 separate groups versus 2 bigger groups. So
Okay.
I think it is a factor, but I think we're really taking a new kind of approach to it.
Okay.
Here's a question, Mr. Moncrief, since you've been with your teachers, obviously, since the beginning, what is the feeling you're getting from your teachers now about bringing students back in the K-1 at the school?
They want the kids to come back, but they are anxious about this fight, I'll be honest with that. I don't think it's made them so anxious that they don't want to be there, but they are anxious about it, but they also, on the other hand, they want to be in the classroom, they're excited, they're looking forward to it somewhat. And, You know, I just think all the parents need to understand what Dr. Harding said in every meeting. Get a plan B, because just in what we've done with the children in our building with symptoms, with some relative having exposure, with a few things we've dealt with in contact tracing, get a plan B, because we just don't know. We just don't know. And going with Ms. Statskel's comment about, you know, she reiterated that, but you don't know. I mean, we could go all the way through December and be fine, come back in January with the 4th and 5th and get hammered. I mean, it is it's where we are. So I just would like the understanding from the parents that when we send a child home with symptoms of not necessarily COVID, but that list of symptoms, when we call and send them home, don't get mad at us, because you're ensuring that we can continue to do what we do.
I appreciate that, because I think that's the honesty of somebody who's seeing it every single day. And he's experiencing the teacher's hands-on every single day. And I think that, and that's why, you know, I think it's so important that we engage the administrators and the teachers, because if they don't have the confidence in doing what they're doing every single day, then it's a trickle-down effect. And the parents don't have the confidence in it, and then the students don't have the confidence in it. And so I think that to your point is they want to have contact with kids. They haven't seen any real kids since last March, quote unquote. And I think that is, you know, I think that's what they're really learning to. And I think it's just a learning pod of knowing as teachers, they're taught and designed to do face-to-face learning. They're not taught and designed to do virtual. And so I think part of that is just the excitement of trying to do something what they have gone to school to do. And I think back to the plan B, I think that you're right. I mean, we don't know how the future is going to hold it, but I appreciate everybody's hard work in trying to make something happen so that we're moving forward in that process.
We've met with, so myself, administrators, number of members of the division leadership team, with the K-1 teachers, really every other Friday. So we've met with them twice. The first time, had some great conversations, and you know, can you give us more answers on this? This is what we, so worked through that, met with them Friday before, not this past Friday before last, and it was a whole nother series of questions. So we worked through those. A lot of those were around leave and different pieces. So Cynthia worked with them. So that's the work that they're going to continue to do, because they have done a phenomenal job since March. Well, before March, goes without saying, but since this unprecedented time, you know, we want to make sure that we're taking care of them and working with them. So continue doing that process, no matter what, and then doing that with the remaining cohorts moving through. So they are the ones that limit, you know, day to day and work through those pieces.
Okay, so there's an opportunity, board members, before we vote. I just want to make sure everybody's had a chance to say anything they want to say.
I have a couple more slides. You want me to throw those
Oh,
in
you
real quick,
want to? Sure.
or- I think we've answered most of it, but just
Okay.
for the audience there as well. So the health screening place screenings, we talked about that quite a bit. Required daily health screening for symptoms by parent guardian prior to leaving home. We're working on finalizing the screening tool for accountability. We're trying to accomplish two things. One, accountability. Families, we need you on this. But the second is management at the school level too. So working on something that meets both those needs. And then all students' temperatures will be taken upon arrival at school as well. Arrival to school, and then staff at the elementary specifically each have their own scanner. So they'll have flexibility within the day as well.
And that doesn't substitute for the parents checking it.
It does not. This is a second level of screening that we'll have in place. Any kid that appears symptomatic will be screened by the nurse as well. So we have additional steps.
And symptomatic means symptomatic. It doesn't mean just COVID, because it could be the flu,
Correct.
right? It could be a really bad cold. They're not sure what it
It
is.
could be TB. We had a kid this summer, it was teething, we were able to distribute, but, there are symptoms that present. I mean, we're talking 5 to 6 year olds, so it's,
Well, my youngest has terrible asthma induced by this time of year allergies.
Yes.
I mean, it looks like COVID symptoms, so, yeah.
Challenging.
so that's a little bit on that piece. No, there we go. Wanted you to see some of the visuals, the preparations, as you've gone through school, you've seen these as well. So we have the hand sanitization, hand sanitizing stations, thank you. Signage, that's just one example of a sign, but we have other signs and arrows and traffic flows and stand here and all those components. And then you'll see a couple of actual classrooms as we're working through what setup looks like. You can see by the setup of that class, to Dr. Harvey's point earlier, it does not look like what a kindergarten typically looks like. So I wanted you guys to see those. Updated timeline. So we're here. We need to talk through the vote, but whether we're voting on this cohort, and we're going to go cohort by cohort. Okay, that's all
Is
right.
that all right with everybody? You good with that?
What's that, I'm sorry?
If we vote by cohort,
Okay.
because things change.
Okay, so we'll come before for each cohort. Right, is that what we're saying? Okay. So that'll also play into that window as far as bringing kids back, because we do have to time that with the, which we can do.
Wait a second, just on that. We have to make sure is that if we're voting on each cohort, that how that is going to align with our meetings. Do you know what I'm saying? So we're not holding them up
Right.
because of a meeting. If they're ready to go back,
We've been very diligent about not, there are some things we could go ahead on right now that we have not, because we want you to vote on it first. So just know that after a vote, you need a 2-week, like after a vote, let's assume approval this evening, we'll be running rounds. We're doing some of that background just in case, but we're not gonna do a lot of that without this. So it's just a factor to keep in mind and as we communicate. I just wanted to, as we're voting, just to make sure that we're clear on that aspect.
So if we structured it differently, would that help accelerate the process of bringing back the next cohorts?
It could, but at the same time, I mean, I think one of the comments at our last meeting is, the board voted on this in the beginning, and as we shifted, that, the board is in this piece. So I don't want to, if there's a way we can find sort of a middle ground that the board still has that piece in there. We can start with cohort 2 and look at cohort 3 and shift from there. I mean, potentially at the next vote, we feel comfortable with the process.
I mean, right, I was gonna say that we wouldn't be bringing any other cohort back prior to Thanksgiving. So, I mean, we have another meeting prior to that.
You're correct, yep. So if we want to go let's go with the cohort approach, vote on a cohort approach, vote on cohort 2, come back for cohort 3, and then the board at their discretion always has the opportunity to shift that. So
Well, I guess it seems like we could go ahead and survey parents now.
we can't do the survey work, and I think that really informs the decision, and I think led for a better discussion here tonight, because you had that data in front of you. Okay,
Seems like the sooner we do that, the better, because that takes one variable.
really, the survey determines the model that we can provide. It's really, there are some grade levels and spaces that it really would determine that. So kindergarten orientation, proposed kindergarten return date, proposed grade 1 return date, and then we monitor, assess, and plan for future goals. Okay. And then next steps, really continue to prepare facilities and classrooms, moving furniture out, moving furniture in, teacher class assignments, which we're working through. And so there are some aspects that we can work through prior to a board approval that wouldn't be wasted effort, that could help us on the other side of the vote. Family communication, transportation, and so forth. So those are our next steps. So Dr. Harding, I believe that's my last slide.
I have a quick question. Is and I don't know if the timing is this, but maybe Kelly or Rodriguez can answer this too, is that we're gonna enter into a phase here in November where winter sports will get ready to start, and I guess we need to come up with a plan on what that is going to look like, because I've had feedback of saying, when are they gonna practice? Is the school gonna provide transportation for them? Will they be able to go in the locker rooms? What is that whole plan of mitigation look like for middle school and high school as they start winter sports? And then transportation in over the winter of, are they gonna be able to allow them to practice during the winter breaks? If they have meets and games, what is that going to look like? And I think that is, because I know we're getting close to that, I want to make sure that we have a plan in place for them, so we're not setting up the middle school or the high school to just, say, nobody gave us any direction here.
So, great questions. I have, this week, as a matter of fact, Mr. Vasquez and Ms. Gray we're working on secondary return to learn. Because even though looking at second semester, it takes a couple months to schedule, it takes the staffing and all those. So we're doing that on Wednesday. And then Thursday, I have an athletics discussion with Mr. Spieth and Ms. Weaver about those specific things. So I would say by Friday, I would have a little bit clearer picture and definitely coming forward in the next day we have that ahead of a start for winter athletics. Okay? Because those are logistics that we would have to work out with the winter start. I believe winter practice would start.
Isn't it like it's the end of November? It's the end of November, first contest that would be is
December 21st.
12. Yeah, I thought it was the middle of December. Yeah, I like that as well. I think we only have 2 basketball games in December. I think they start practice December 12th, and then they play 2 over the break, and then after the holidays, that's when everything really begins.
So we can bring a secondary update back to the board.
Yeah, I thought that was, yeah, because now you got this whole thing about tryouts. How do we do all of that, the evaluation? So to do our coaches justice, we need to give them the best information possible for that.
I think my only comment regarding this decision is, it's been, I think this is probably one of the toughest decisions that I've had to make since, one of the toughest things since I've been on the board. Part of that compounded just by working in the healthcare industry. I don't feel really good about the numbers and the trajectory and the way that things are going, but I do feel really good about the plan that you put together. I feel really good about the size of the classrooms. And I just want to commend you and the rest of the team. You all have done a fantastic job.
Thank you.
It's very difficult. I also think that, we're very dependent on the community, and I think the community really needs to work hard to minimize their risk as much as possible in every opportunity that they possibly can. If virtual is working for your kindergarten or first grade, I feel like that's a sign that you should stay with that plan. I don't know. I guess that's all I have to say about that.
And I would just add to that, to what Ms. Gaskell said, when we're talking about lessons learned with other counties that have gone back, they're reaching out to the parents and the guardians saying, you've got to work with us on this. You've got to be very faithful with those health screenings at home. If your child is sick, keep them home. If you can drive your child to school, drive your child to school. So it's really a lot are on the parents and the guardians here. And like Ms. Gaskell said, to keep them safe and to really work with us on this. Otherwise, we'll be back in a couple of weeks making another decision that we don't want to make. And so we need parents to really help us with this.
And I think we also need to recognize that we know that this is extremely difficult for families now, and even though we're transitioning, it's still going to be challenging. It's because it's not going to be normal school for a long time.
I just want to thank our families for their support. I know it has not been traditional or easy, but really have partnered with us. And whether you choose to come back in person and move forward with phases, or you stay virtual, just that grace and that partnership, just keep that spirit moving, because we're gonna need that as we move forward with this. We're working through this together, and I think hand in hand, side by side, we can make some good strides this year with our kids. So I just want to thank the board for always asking great questions and pushing us to do more and go back to the table. And I know Return to Learn has been on every work session and board meeting, but we bring to a smarter product because of the work we do.
Thank you. I think I might be the odd man out, and odd lady out. I think everyone's done an incredible job. I want to look at every single one of you and thank you for all the things that you've done, because you've really put together something that that I think has a great deal of potential. My concerns are with continuity, with opening and closing and opening and closing. And I'm worried about the impact that will have on kids. But I also know that K-1 in particular, but all kids belong back in school. And I have to say, I don't think any of us that have had to make decisions have slept well trying to think about what to do. But I am concerned about continuity. I'm concerned about higher cases of COVID and quarantines. I'm concerned about the fall and winter in terms of higher cases, and and we've got some vacations and families getting together, and there is a part of me that would like to just see this start second semester, that we start with our cohort 2 second semester and move forward into the spring. And then finally, you got a hint of that earlier. I am insulted that the Department of Ed can have educators that sit at home, and yet they expect all of our teachers across Virginia to come back. I'm insulted by that attitude. So I feel that if they are concerned about their safety, then I want to be concerned about teacher safety. And for that, yes, you can already tell how I'm going to vote. So with that, we're going to start over here. We're going to go around and just, so currently, let's see what the motion is, folks. Do I hear a motion to approve the Return to Learn plan for cohort 2 grades K-1 as presented? Okay, do I hear a second?
A second.
Okay, let's go around and vote.
Aye.
Aye. No. Okay, motion carries 4-1. Okay. Next item, well, let me make sure, I think we're already into all of the motions at this point. So the next motion, do I hear a motion to approve personnel matters as presented?
I move that we approve personnel matters as presented.
Okay, do I hear a second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve the year-end transfer FY20 as presented?
I move we approve the year-end transfer FY20 as presented.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no opposed, motion carries. Do I hear a motion to approve the appropriation of CARES Act funding as presented?
I'll make a motion, we appropriate the CARES Act funding as presented.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no opposed, motion carries. That brings us to the end of our work session. Thank you, everybody.
Next board meeting, November 2nd.
Okay, November 2nd.